Right, good afternoon everyone. We're nicely warmed up, so I am anyway. I've been standing in front of that for 15 minutes. Brief intro. I do lots of scripted stuff because, as a lot of people know, I talk too much and I digress, and God knows where I am. So I just wanted to let you know that Wanda and I have lived at Birdwood since 1979, bought the property in 73. Did all the wrong things, put too many stock on, all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to learn quickly, and so that's exactly what we did. We had a vision for the place, which I'll explain to you shortly. We're actually paying back, by the sort of things that I do, we're paying back the good fortune that we had to live in a rural environment. And from 1989, I decided to do something public about that. And so I helped set up the Upper River Torrens Landcare Group. Then in 1994, the Native Grasses Steering Committee, which evolved into the Native Grass Resources Group. And then this project, the Upper Torrens Land Management Project, in 1998. So it's great that it's still thriving, and so are the others. The reason to do that, the reason to get involved, was because I was concerned about landscape function, about how watercourses were misbehaving because of things that were being done to them that were bad for them, and how the landscape was also suffering. It's good to remember, and I remind myself often, that it's a privilege to own rural land, especially if you don't make your living from it. If you make your living from it, you perhaps tend to push it too hard and you make some big mistakes, or the seasons do bad things for you, and you learn or don't learn from those mistakes. But when you don't have to do that, then the land probably should be given the absolute mint treatment that you can give it. And so you've got responsibilities far greater than anyone who lives in an apartment in the city or a house in the suburbs. The reason for this particular case study is that we decided very early on that we needed some kind of template. If we were going to go down this path of property restoration, then we should record things. And so that's what we did. I thought we'd better start this one off this time with a decent crop. And that's one of the tall wallaby grasses that eventually put seed heads up about here and has a leaf mass down around knee high, very much like cocksfoot or phalaris. 16 hectares. It's good for you because many people with horse properties are very often running from about 20 to 5 hectares. There's something to pick up there. The fact that through the noughties drought, the rainfall dropped dramatically, so the mean wasn't 730 mils per annum, but much less. You notice the land class, so that's non-cultivated, non-arable land, much of the property. So it was obvious that the enterprise had to be something like that, or as I suggested to someone, growing saffron or something exotic, or who knows. Comparison of the landscape, the fact that you've got all that reflective surface tells you that there wasn't much there in 1974. The big trees, scattered ones, about 24 of them in all, and then a comparison with 2011. I'll click through some fairly fast because you'll be able to get all this text anyway, and not just through the video but through the hard copy. So this is what drove our need for seed, and this will be different to what will drive your need for seed. So we wanted that first of all, and then secondly, an ecological environment, and then, as you see, a template, which is what we'll follow through in a sec. And we're particularly bothered about the fuel load of exotic grasses and the fact that there was no balance of C3 and C4 grasses. I'm presuming that this is what's driving you if you go down this path, that you'll be looking to achieve the fodder and forage needs of the horses. And to do that, you'll be after safe pasture, which we've just covered, and you'll be after enough pasture to give them a 50% at least grazing option. You also need to have protective soil cover, and I hope I can touch on this again just before we conclude today. The industry benchmark for all grazers is 70%. That came out of the decade of land care, which was a response to one of the third biggest land degradation passages that have occurred in Australia's history. One was the Federation drought, second was the 1930s, our Dust Bowl era compared to the United States, and then the next, the 70s into 80s. And 70% cover had to be the minimum. If you're if you're a holistic farmer, then you'll try for 100% cover. Our property's probably 100%. It's hard to find soil on our property. So this is our process to get seed, and that's of course the focus. If you're going to put native grasses into a landscape, the seed's got to come from somewhere. But for us, we weren't looking to do a big productivity process, because we weren't stocking animals we didn't have to produce. So we did the simple thing in 1990 of pegging and protecting and weeding, and that was mostly a hand job at that stage.
When you say small, how small? You've got small areas.
It could be as big as that table, could be as big as this area that we're seating in, that sort of thing, yeah. When you see the species list in a second, you'll note that. So that's what we inherited, and as you can see, albeit a small number of plants. So you've got the Lachnogrostis one species, the wallaby, and a number of those, genera, second genera, the speargrass is third genera, weeping ricegrass fourth, common reed 5, tussock grass poa 6. And there would have been, as I said, that sort of combination of sizes across the property, because it was hammered, because it's a rocky area and sandy inorganic flats. And when you have that sort of landscape and you're forcing animals on it, the impacts are pretty bad over time. The fact that it had very many rocky areas enabled a lot of these grasses to survive in those niches. The warm season perennials, brush wiregrass, windmill grass, emu grass, which is kind of like a kind of salt cooch. If you've got Disticus disticifila on your property, you know you've got salt in significant quantities in the soil and the water. Mat grass, Amathrion sonata, and one area of kangaroo grass that was probably about as big as the table, and that was identified in 1989. It's still there, and a few recruited plants. So what were we going to crank up? We chose the wallaby grass, the weeping rice grass, the kangaroo grass, and the chloris. The last two, because if you put C4s into your growing area, or you encourage them if you've got them, you know that provided you get a cold winter, certainly some frost, but then looking at the leaf mass of the plant to make sure that it's purpling off. So the green leaf mass is going and the leaves are becoming bluey purple. Both of those grasses do that. You then know that you can go in with a knockdown herbicide and take out everything else that's there at the right time, somewhere in winter when everything's cranked up, but not when it's too big. And so it gives you a management option. The other two, well, Microlina can handle knockdown herbicide too, but you only have to wave it past a wallaby grass and They get pretty upset and usually die on you. Okay, so we've continued this process. So in 2006, that was the result. So now the property's got well over, in fact, 19,000 square metres of managed plots, from as small, Julia's the one, to as high as 600. And the property kind of looks like that. It's good to have a plan. As you can see, that's a 2007 plan, and it would do a lot better if it was updated now. But every colour's got, according to its legend, a grass or an activity. So seed store, we had some, so we had something to start with. Your neighbour might, or a friend of a friend's property might. And we'll be able to, as you can see, you know, from Ian's, but in this particular case, you'll know from the process I've gone down, which is different, that you will, with grasses, get a heap of seed very, very fast. And Andrew will add other options and pathways that you can go down. But as I point out, you have to have the mindset to go down this path, because this is a transformation thing. It's not just a game changer thing, it's a brain changer thing. And that demands a lot of concentration from you and willpower. This is the common thing. This is what Ian's encouraging, and it's the only thing that can happen if you're going to do broadacre stuff. We'll benefit from that, as we are today. You go out and you buy seed, and the more pressure from groups like yourselves and farmers with marginal lands that need native grasses, because their marginal lands will be worth nothing to them if they don't put something on it, because they're not going to get a crop going anymore. So they don't need large amounts of seed. And this is not coming from the wild, nor should it be. Back in 1999, Darryl Cranbuell Senior, who was one of the significant blokes in native vegetation, he said at a workshop, we can't stop raping the native vegetation stands. And you think about doing that just up the road here in Mount Pleasant, there's only 2% of remnant vegetation surviving. You can take small amounts out of it, and thanks to grasses, you can get a hell of a lot going. So yeah, this is the way. I mean, the thing that Ian launched in 1998, coming out of a very big research project, the Ligule project, which would only be funded if the results of it could be commercialised. Ian put his hand up to do that. So, personal discoveries. This is just like a little picture book approach. So there's our first starter patch of Ostradanthonia, or Ritodisperma geniculata, which, as you know, is Oxley under Ian's commercialisation. So it's a pretty small patch, but 8 to 10 kilos. For some years, it's been, as you can see, it's been there for a while now, 2002. It's been burned a number of times. It's been herbicided with broadleaf herbicide a few times. So now it gets the odd weed in it. Windmill grass, that was pretty good, 8 kilograms from that area. And in a year like this, 2, maybe even 3 crops will come out of a windmill grass patch. And this is pretty significant. If I want to feel good, I could just sit down and re-watch these, because just like Ian's very large area results, these are pretty significant, and they're all hand cast. You do have to get the action right. There's a depending on what you're holding. If you're holding Microlina, then because of the dart type, the seed you can actually see it falling like little arrows. Other seed is very light and may need something like sawdust or a bit of sand in it to get the casting going well. But it's just a sweeping action. It's one of those things that's almost primeval, and when you do it, you just feel good. Whether it gets the result, Ian was focused on the result, I was focused on the feel good. I have to disagree with him, even if I didn't want to. Planning the plots, depending on your property, you're really going to have a look at that, and where am I going to put these plots? That's if you decide to do this. And then, what are the species? Are they ones that I know about? Are they ones that I want? So there are decisions. Can I get this all started by making sure that if the season's shit, then I've got water and I can at least get them established. And after that, I know that they've got the greatest survival instincts known to a species or known to a genera. So, yep, then you look at the weed control, and then you think about, okay, how am I going to design this so that I can get in and harvest this stuff? This is my formula, differs from Ian's. I don't want to be out there doing harrowing, so I just do the chemical thing. Minimum of a year, depending on the weed load or what the weeds are. 2 years is better, 3 years is best. Because some of those weeds, cooch, silvergrass, brome and wireweed, are very persistent. So harrows, simple little diamond harrows, things about so wide, drag it behind a quad bike, you'll see in a sec. When to plant. In your bag that you'll go away with is this sheet, C3, C4 sheet. It explains the carbon pathway, which the C refers to, and on the back of that it lists all the species, all the genera that are in South Australia. And they're pretty high. There's something like, what is it, 43 for C4s and 31 or 28 or something for C3s, and about 121 and 131 species. A lot of plants to choose from. We didn't talk about temperature of soil, but that's a kind of a guide, which is why we pick spring for the C3s and autumn for the C3s and spring for the C4s. The breaking range just means that after you've done the casting thing, the raindrops themselves give you the seed soil contact. So that just saves you a job. So you don't have to do the raking over or dragging a bag over it or whatever. And the C4s, late winter or into the warmer period of spring. And given the way things are going at present, that's getting a little bit tricky, because if the soil moisture drops off in spring, just as it's bad for hay growers, it's bad for people trying to establish C4 species, because they do need to at least have some dumps of rain or moisture in the soil for some time. Kangaroo grass for me is the exception. So we do a hay cut, which is what I did for Pauline. Well, you need a fair bit of hay. I've got the figures on that, and we'll publish it somehow at some stage to give people an idea of that. But it's harvest the hay one day, in the afternoon of the same day, take it to where you want to put it, and then cast it out. In late winter, kill all the weeds that have come up through the site, because you want something to burn. In spring, burn the poison site, and you get plants up like hairs on a dog's back. And my old colleague John Stafford did this a long time ago. So teaching a Green Corps team the technique, and doing the fireproofing a property. They wanted green grass around it that they could mow, that they didn't want to put water on, because they had a bit of money and they preferred to put water on the croquet ring or whatever. And I put this here mostly because it should get in the hands of council at some stage, because council have to realise that you can fireproof a town with native grasses. Soil prep. Ian's covered a number of these on the surface, lodged in crevices or drill in, and the kangaroo grass will drill down to about 1.5 centimetres. Pretty much measure them and they're down about that far. To crumble the soil, I use the rake, and I've actually cut prongs out of a rake so that you don't pick up too much litter when you go through and scratch it up. So the prongs are about so far apart instead of being really close to each other. Or of course the ATV. And Pauline's action's really good. She's sowing her own stuff there, and she's actually sowing Ian's Gallop mix. And she hasn't seen this photo yet, but look at that, Pauline, that's a good one. So you can actually see the stuff going. Yeah, good. So a light breeze helps, because when you're throwing something, you actually want it to spread a little bit. So light is the key word, and you actually see where they fall. So if you missed a little bit, you can just toss a little bit more on. And this is where some intervention follows. If you've got strong winds following just after your seeding, or the soil surface isn't really as crumbly as you'd like it, then you can have a light roller, drag a bag, light rake, chain, whatever. Machinery. I did use some machinery on our place. Ian's covered all of that, which is terrific. We chose John Stafford's specialised hydro-pneumatic seeder. It's a really interesting unit. John's a guy who likes to get an idea and kind of squeeze every last bit out of it and run with it for a long time. And he experimented with polymer gels, hydro mulching type compounds into that big tank up there, and he used his exhaust of the car to blow the gel out as it came down the tube into the orifices that let it drop out into the ground, a little cutting V, and you can see the gel type substance there. So it's in fact keeping the florets moist for a reasonable time before natural action pushes into the ground. And if everything goes well, key point, they're wild seeds. These are not the seeds that you get to put into your lawn that have been proven to have so many days to germinate, provided they're, that sort of thing. No, these are wild seeds, so they've got their inbuilt biological germination clock. With the stuff that we did, that like the roadside out of Birdwood, that Microlina went in May and took 28 days to emerge. So fortnight, if everything's going well, could be double that time if it's not. Or if it's too late, the C3s mightn't germinate at all, mightn't emerge at all. They may wait till spring. Microlina does that occasionally. With the C4s, I've got red grass and windmill grass up in 3 to 4 days. So the first lot of rain that's gone on them, or the first irrigation that's put on them, has triggered the germination almost instantaneously, and then the first leaf is up 3 to 4 days later. And I'd suggested this back door pot, so you don't have to go out into the paddock and crawl around or whatever. So do that. Yates seed raising mix, so there's no nasty seeds in there. So everything that comes up has got to be one of the things that you put in. And then post-emergence time, very critical for weed observation. If you've gone down my path, then the weed load should be low. But who knows? You know, the moment you do any herbicide procedure, there are exotic seeds sitting in the ground just waiting for their opportunity that you don't even know about. So where did that one? I said, we haven't got any of that on our property. Where did that come from? Well, it's there. That can happen. You can see what's happened with all the little green patches there where the broadleaf herbicide treatment, something like MCPA, dicamba, or a mix of both, is what I might use. They're under different brand names. And the you know, down on the hands and knees stuff is with a little sickle knife because it's just easy to get just below the subsoil roof ball and just cut them off. Yeah, I do a lot of pre-emergence herbicide. I do another casting thing with Ronstar granules. You're supposed to do them with a shaker. I just put a surgical glove on and toss them out. And I've only got a life in the soil of 10 weeks. And moisture incorporates them, so if there's no rain within a few days, a little bit of water over the top of them helps. And that means that within that little bed that you've got of stuff, or even if you've got a reasonable plot somewhere on your place that you want to encourage, you don't want any of the vulpea or barley grass or whatever to come up in autumn, cast this stuff out and it'll stop that from happening. So it'll halve or even eliminate that task for you. Yeah, and you may have to get ready for autumn. That's, summer, because that's what happened on the Mount Torrens Strait, a second one of our seeding plots, roadside fuel reduction stuff. And that's near Burford's Hill Road, coming back this way to Birdwood. And in summer last year, because of rain, we got annual summer exotic grasses on the edge of the road, which also seeded into the red grass and the kangaroo grass that are on that site. So that's a bit of a bugger. So it means that this year we'll have to go out and try and get the timing right to get pre-emergent herbicide on that site to stop that from happening, or the weed seed load will go up dramatically. This is what production time can look like on a small property. So that's 8 years old, that first plot, the one that you saw being cast. And then another plot where the stems are all burgundy coloured and the seed heads are very similar. That one's khaki in colour, the leaf mass. There's another one we've got that's bluish, mauve, another one that's yellow, stems and tips of leaves. Doesn't that wallaby grass crop look stunning? Yeah. And a bit of red grass just out from the house. And then 3 wallabies, some very small plots as you can see, but you get a lot of seed off them. So C3's first harvest already mentioned, C4's within 3 months. The summer rain, this is the kind of the key thing for all of this, what you're doing and what a whole lot of properties really need to do in the Mount Lofty Ranges. If we're going to get more summer rain, and there's nothing out there but soil or clover and oats sitting in the soil seed bank, they're going to germinate like they did this summer. So after the rain, they all germinated, all around here, everything went green. And then 2 weeks later, there was nothing. If you've got C3s in there, native grasses, and C4s, they bolt. They germinate if they're C4s, and they bolt if they're C3s and C4s. So, if we're going to improve our land management and what happens in the soil, and basically you're really, I mean, I know you think that you're horse people, but everyone that's on the land is a soil person. Being on the land, any kind of farming of any kind, is managing soil, doing something with soil. Ian's talked about the synchronicity stuff. This is my, Sylvia, this is my thing. So you go up to the wallaby grass seed head and you go, and if the seeds go flying through the air, harvest it. If it's something like speargrass, that can work, but it's much easier to run your hand. Just gently clasp your fist around it and run it up, and you won't get stabbed, and you should get a handful of seed heads. And then the pinch test, of course. And Joan Gibbs, that maybe some of you might know, she does the tooth test, but I don't like putting seeds, especially ones with pointy ends on them, into my mouth. This is my harvest method, PowerVac tailor-made harvester brush cutter, or just going out with the shears and cutting them off. Sweeping action with a PowerVac. A mate converted a Victor footpath vac for me. That works pretty well. It's got some fingers there to make the thing sit up, and then the vac drags the seeds up into a bag. This is a John Stafford small version of a typical reel over brush harvester. See the blue rotating brushes in here, and the reels coming over, sort of pushing the seeds onto the brush. And any form of catcher mower for many species. Although I use a pram wheel mower now because I can get it up to, about 200 off the ground instead of these things that are down to 75, which most mowers are, and it's a bit close, you get a lot of thatch that way. Yep, and the decking bit with a brush cutter, you can actually almost windrow it yourself if you get a decent action on that. Straight into the trailer, straight around to Pauline's or wherever else. Yeah, if you've got one of these, well, sure, you can deck a lot of grass this way. You can bale it, or in the case of this kangaroo grass, take it off to another site and just dump it on the site and spread it around. You mightn't want to get this far ahead, but there are some things to consider. If something does collect trash or lots of heads, then you need some way of getting some of that material out, probably for your purposes, even just for casting. You probably need it a little cleaner. And that's just budgie wire, bird wire on a little frame, and I've cleaned heaps of my stuff like that.
How do you use it?
Sorry?
I don't get what you're doing with it.
I'm holding because I've cut down the thermometer, I actually grab hot and I lay it so that, I do it with speargrass too. It's all laid exactly when I pack it so that I can just put my hand around it and get a bunch of it and then go back across the wire. You don't damage the little floret that way. As you've seen from probably those of you that picked up the little package outside, some of the wallaby grasses, especially Ostradanthonia geniculata, the Oxley, will shed their seeds if you get them when they're completely ripe. So that makes vacuuming a fairly significant way of getting a lot of those seeds. Otherwise, if you're cutting and pulling them up, you're going to drop a lot. And I think it was Ian mentioned, yeah, air drying stuff, because you'll have green material in there of some kind in what you've harvested, and you shouldn't put it away in a bin with any kind of, with a load of moisture in it. So it'll be holding some moisture, the seed, of course. I use 44-gallon drums mostly. Yeah, so we don't have a flock of sheep or horses, and so I use fire mostly to clean up our patches. That's the one just out from the house, the starter patch. And this is, you know, this, we'll see another one in a sec, but this is, you should see all these gaps in between a native grass crop after you burned it. You can see all the gaps. Weeping rice grass crop with all the gaps. You can see the load of thatch that's in there when you haven't got an animal doing a regular grazing of it. What will happen, oh yeah, I should mention this. I usually do the burns in autumn for the C3 grasses and in winter, late winter for the C4s. And I don't worry about edge control in winter, but I do worry about edge control in autumn. And so I use Blaze Tamer. There's a thing in your packet when you get it. Looks like milk, this stuff. South Australian technology, state of the art. And you just add about 16 mil of that to your backpack. And when you spray it out, it forms a film. And if the fire starts to get away, you know, if it flares up and you just hit the flame, puts it out like that, like in milliseconds, because the chemical, the polymer thing, absorbs the heat and takes the heat part out of the fire equation. Stunning stuff. Right. They can speak. Let's see. They know. They know. So, yeah, a game changer indeed. You can see the hay cut off this. If they didn't cut off the hay, goodness knows what they do with it. I haven't got enough kangaroos there. We've got plenty here that we could send over there, but they don't have them.